Hey guys, I've been getting some requests on how to do deadlifts, so I figured I'd go over on how to do that with you guys. So deadlift is basically one of the most common lifts a human being does every day. It is what you're doing when you're bending over and picking something up from the ground and standing up with whatever is in your hands. The reason we deadlift is because it gives you a lot of core strength, it strengthens your glutes, and it strengthens your hamstrings, and it also strengthens your grip in your back. However, if you're feeling it all in your back and in your spine, you're probably doing it wrong. You want to be feeling this in your glutes and your hamstrings more than anything, and maybe even in your traps if you haven't worked out your upper body much. So, the first thing I'm going to go over with the deadlift is the straight back. So when I am doing a deadlift, I am bending over at my hips, pushing my butt back. And the thing about my back is my tailbone, my shoulder blades right in between my spine, right in between my shoulder blades and my head. They are all in a line. So if I was going to do a deadlift and I had this pole on my back, it would stay on my shoulder blades, my head, and my tailbone all at the same time. So while doing a deadlift, my back is straight. When I'm doing a deadlift, I want to keep my butt out. My tailbone is always popped out. Like if I had a tail sticking out of my tailbone, I'm sticking that tail up in the air. And my chest and my collarbones, they're sticking out. Another thing about a deadlift is your lats, these muscles that are under your armpits right here, you use them when you pull down. When I'm doing a deadlift, I am pulling down and back. So by pulling my shoulders down and back, I am pinching my shoulder blades between my spine. So I'm pinching my shoulder blades on my back right here, pulling them back. So there are two phases to a deadlift. There's the bend over and there's the drop. So I'm going to show you the drop. So the drop is where you just bring your hips back and come straight to the knee. This is all it is at first. If you've never done a deadlift before, just start with doing these. So I'm going to scoot back a little bit so you can see my feet. When I'm doing this, you can see my feet right here. My toes and the front balls of my feet can come off the ground as I'm doing this. My butt's back as far as I can bring it. My chest is out. My shoulders are back and pinched. And I am balancing on my heels. I'm never on my toes when I do a deadlift. A deadlift, all the weight is on your heels. So I'm coming down, chest out, shoulders back, weight on the heels, butt back, back is straight, and my head is up. I'm never bending down, looking down. I'm looking at the ground right in front of me. And I'm coming up. Okay, now phase two of the deadlift. So once you've started with the bend over, once your hands reach your knees, you don't want to do this till your hands reach your knees. It's really common for people to do a squat and let their knees come forward, but your knees are actually staying behind the bar until your hands reach the bar. Once the bar reaches your knees, you can keep your weight on your heels and come even lower with your heels or with your knees coming forward. And while you're keeping your weight on your heels, you drive through the heels and come back up. Another thing about when you're coming back up, your legs, another way to get better glute activation is imagine you're standing in place and you're spreading your legs apart. Imagine there's a crack on the ground in between your legs and you're literally trying to separate the tectonic plates from one another. So you're spreading as hard as you can. So that's going to allow for more glute activation. So I'm coming down, I'm spreading my feet, weight on the heels, and I'm pushing my heels out from one another, getting a lot of glute activation. Another thing about deadlifts, there are many different grips you can do for a deadlift. One of the groups I like to do because of the posture I have, so your thoracic spine, that's the spine where your shoulder blades are. Let me get a little bit closer so you can see. For me, my shoulders roll forward slightly and my chest concaves in like this. So the more of a hunchback you have, that means that's the tighter your thoracic spine is. So if you have a tight thoracic spine and your back curves slightly like that, go ahead and use an underhand grip. By using an underhand grip, it allows you to pull your shoulders back, your chest out, and it'll give you much better posture. And it'll prevent you from hurting the middle of your back. So with an underhand grip, keeping the weight on my heels, coming down. Once I reach the knee, go ahead and let the knee come forward slightly, pushing out on the heels, driving through the heels to come up. And then there's typical the overhand grip. Whenever you're gripping a bar, make sure your hands are on the outside of your knees. That is for a typical deadlift. If you're doing a sumo deadlift, which is where you get your legs much wider, so you get your feet really wide, and you make sure you point your toes out, super far out, and you're basically doing the exact same thing, except keeping your weight on your heels, hands in the middle, bend down, come about halfway down the shin, and come out. When you're doing a sumo deadlift, you're going to get a lot more inner thigh action, a lot more inner hamstring. So usually you want to start out with a normal deadlift first, and once you get the flexibility and the mobility, and once you're able to do a deadlift safely and correctly, then go ahead and move up to a sumo deadlift. As you get heavier in weight, an alternating grip is a pretty common way to do deadlift. So an alternating grip would be one hand under, one hand over. And what I like to do, I'll do half my set with one hand. Say I was doing a 10 rep set, I'd do about 5 reps. And then I'd bring the bar down, switch hands, and then I'd do more. So another thing about deadlifts is the typical weight you want to, the typical height you want to be doing on a deadlift, you want to, the space of a 45-pound plate. When you have a typical Olympic bar, which weighs 45 pounds, and you put a 45-pound plate on each side, which are the biggest wheels they have in a gym, you are going to be at the ideal height to do a deadlift. So what that means is if you're not able to pick up 135 pounds right off the bat, which a lot of people aren't, that means you got to go to the aerobics room, you got to get those little steps, and you got to put them under the plates. So let's say we were starting out with 10-pound plates. Say, let's say we're doing 10-pound plates here. I'm going to get something from the aerobics room. I'm going to get some steps, and I'm going to put them under the bar. I don't have any steps here in my apartment, so I'm just showing you with these chairs for an example. I will put the risers, I'll put the steps under each plate just like this. And I want the bar to be halfway up my shin. So depending on your height, that could be lower. If you're super tall, that could be higher. Usually it could be around 3 spacers if it's a 5-pound, 2 spacers if it's a 10-pound, and maybe like 1 or 0 spacers if it's a 25-pound plate on each side. It's all going to depend on your height, but you want the bar to be halfway up your shin. So if these were lower, I would be coming halfway down my shin. So ideally, I would have this bar coming right here, halfway down the shin, and then I'd be coming up. And that's